So, not that long ago, I beat Shadow Warrior 3, and as a longtime Shadow Warrior 2 fan, here are my thoughts about it. On its own, it's great. It's a great, fun game. A small game, but it's very fun, and it's just has a lot of enjoyment to it. Coming from Shadow Warrior 2, though, I can say it does feel kind of underwhelming, honestly. Coming from a longtime Shadow Warrior 2 fan who has a lot of hours in Shadow Warrior 2, has played it a lot to really get a feel for how the game is and just to know what the game's all about. It does kind of feel underwhelming, unfortunately, because they had a lot going in Shadow Warrior 2, and they did a lot with it, but they did a lot with it, don't get me wrong. I don't think the stuff they did do was good, but it would have been nice to see more of that, what they started in Shadow Warrior 2 with Shadow Warrior 3. The gameplay for me is not the problem. I actually do like the gameplay more in Shadow Warrior 3 than in 2. As much as I love the gameplay in Shadow Warrior 2, I like the combat in Shadow Warrior 3. However, again, if you're coming off of Shadow Warrior 2, don't expect a very similar experience. It's pretty different. You have a lot less weapons and less enemies also, as well as less chapters, as well as less sections. You know, Zilla City is not in the game, and as well as just entire villages and sections of Shadow Warrior 2, they're just not there. Shadow Warrior 2, where it actually felt like a continuation of Shadow Warrior 1, Shadow Warrior 3 feels like something else entirely, almost. It honestly does. And that's not exactly a bad thing. It means that if you had a big attachment to Shadow Warrior 2 for just Shadow Warrior 2 in general, you will be feeling kind of underwhelmed with this game, I feel, if you had a lot of attachment. I had a lot of attachment as well, but I was willing to suspend some of it to really give this game a proper chance, and I did, and it became a better experience because of that. But if you're really expecting an experience similar to Shadow Warrior 2 and Shadow Warrior 1 in terms of the reboots, you're not really going to be getting that here. You're going to be getting a good experience, just not similar to ones we've already seen. I think the main reason why Flying Wild Hog did this is due to the fact that they didn't really want... Shadow Warrior 1 and 2 feel very similar in terms of style and gameplay and story. They want something to really differentiate from that, as I think they thought a third game with that sort of, in the same vein as the first two, would get old rather quickly, and be, it would just get old because we've already seen it before. And I do think that there is some truth to that, but, still, I do think that they really stripped down a lot of elements I thought Shadow Warrior 2, that I thought made Shadow Warrior 2 so cool. But then again, it's kind of hard to explain. For instance, Shadow Warrior 2 has 71 weapons. Shadow Warrior 3 only has 6. Now, if they added too many more weapons, it would have felt like it was trying to sort of not really be its own thing, instead of sort of trying to replicate Shadow Warrior 2, but instead of failing it. What if it had 50 weapons as opposed to 71? It would feel like Shadow Warrior 2, but less. You know, they really wanted to just differentiate the games as much as possible, still keeping them fun. In terms of story, again, it's just a lot less. On its own, the game is very fun and very great, but if you're really expecting a Shadow Warrior 2 similar experience, you're not going to be getting that. Now, does that mean you should skip the game? No. It's very fun and has a lot of enjoyment to it. And I wish they took a lot of the Shadow Warrior 2's gameplay is fun, but I do like Shadow Warrior 3's more. I think would make a great game if you took a lot of the, I guess, RPG-ish elements from Shadow Warrior 2, such as the open-ish map that you could sort of travel to certain locations that were linear in a sense, as well as the huge amounts of guns, and as well as the side quests and all that. If you took that and gave it Shadow Warrior 3's combat, I think you would have had a very cool game. But maybe may have kept the length. Maybe actually, instead of making it like 5 or 6 hours, make it maybe like 7 or 8. So it's not too long, but it's not too short. Shadow Warrior 3 is very short. It's like 5 or 6 hours. I think adding like a 7th or 8th hour would not have hurt the game at all. And yeah, I think that's like the recipe for a really fun Shadow Warrior game. Maybe not have maybe have more linear missions, or maybe not. I'm not sure, because Shadow Warrior 2 is kind of like a mesh in between linear and open, in a sense, kind of like on that gray area where it can be sort of taken as both, I believe. Maybe have some missions that are linear and some missions that are open. I don't know, but there's a lot of elements that made Shadow Warrior 2 so good that I felt, again, were just stripped away here. So if you're expecting a lot of those elements, certain elements, you're not really going to be getting that. Some say the deal with weapons is more of a quantity over quality, or a quality over quantity sort of ordeal, which I can see that. The weapon lineup, it does cover most of the bases of what you need, but I think for most people who really had a great appreciation for Shadow Warrior 2, again, you're just not really going to be getting that same experience with this game. You're going to be getting a very different experience, more simplified but more straight, more tight experience. A more simplified but more tight, not a unsimplified, loose experience. It's hard to explain. I think most people just still give it a shot to see how they really feel about it. In terms of the story, it's very stripped down. Shadow Warrior 2 story, I don't think, I actually enjoyed it. It's not a story-intensive game. Yeah, I could be playing the game for its story. I'm playing it for its shooting and its combat, and pretty much that. The story is just sort of like a side thing to keep the pace in the game going. And I think it does a good job of doing that. It's compelling. Its characters are nice, compelling. It just had a lot of cool twists and turns to it. I think it is a decent story, and that's kind of like a bonus when you're playing a game like Shadow Warrior 2, especially one they're only expecting to a game you're only getting into for its combat. When it has a nice story, it is a very good bonus. What else do I have to say? So no, back to the story. In terms of Shadow Warrior 3 story on its own is fine. It's pretty good, but compared to Shadow Warrior 2, it feels very lackluster. Where Shadow Warrior 2 story had a lot of cool twists and turns. It felt like Lo Wang was just trying to get paid and just trying to do his thing. Shadow Warrior 3, it more so has... Lo Wang is more so working for the better of everyone as opposed to the better of himself. And with that becomes a much less complex story. Again, if that might be something you like, it might be something you dislike. I was okay with it, but coming from Shadow Warrior 2 story, it does feel kind of lackluster. That's the whole thing, is that if you're coming from this game I'm gonna express this a lot through this video. If you're coming into this game expecting a Shadow Warrior 2 or Shadow Warrior 1 experience, you're not really getting that. It's severely simplified, and again, when you compare the two games, it does work into its detriment. On its own, though, I think it is a worthwhile game, but just again, back to Shadow Warrior 2, if you're coming expecting that, you really shouldn't be. It's a fun game on its own, but honestly, it's really a Shadow Warrior game in terms of name alone and character names. That's it. If you change the names of some of the characters, and change the name of the game to, I don't know, Light Warrior or something like that, it'd be a completely different game and probably won't be seen as something in the Shadow Warrior series. The characters do cross over, not only have different voice actors, but look very different from their Shadow Warrior 1 and 2 counterparts. Lo Wang has a different voice actor, which caused quite a bit of stir in the community, which is very understandable. I like the voice actor of Lo Wang in Shadow Warrior 1 and 2, and I really wish we could have seen him here. Same thing with Zilla's voice actor. What I liked about Zilla's voice actor is that he actually, in Shadow Warrior 2, he actually felt like a decent enough proper villain. That was sort of like, that it generally felt like he was working against you. Shadow Warrior 3, they changed his voice actor to where it actually feels like he's your companion. It would have been very interesting if the villain from Shadow Warrior, if actually felt like you were, Shadow Warrior 2's villain, Zilla, he has a certain feel to him. It'd be cool if you had that same, feel in Shadow Warrior 3, but now you're working with this guy. Would have offered a much more compelling sort of dynamic between the two. Because, again, in Shadow Warrior 3, he feels like a companion as opposed to feeling like a guy who used to be the villain. So at the end of the day, the game stands well on its own, but compared to Shadow Warrior 2, it, I guess you could say it's a rather lackluster experience. But the thing is that it's not trying to compete with Shadow Warrior 2, it's just trying to be its own sole thing, and trying to, be something different from what we've previously played. Where again, Shadow Warrior 2 was meant to feel like a continuation of the first game, the first Shadow Warrior. This is meant to feel like something completely different entirely, which is understandable, I guess, because I think you would have had also a lot of complaints from people if the game just felt like another version of Shadow Warrior 2, but with newer graphics and some newer things. So I can understand where they're coming from when they want the game to be really different. Let's talk about the soundtrack, well, more specifically the menu music. Again, it stands well on its own, but compared to Shadow Warrior 2, it feels very lackluster. But the core gameplay itself of Shadow Warrior 3 is very fun, and I do like it more than Shadow Warrior 2. It just feels more tight and compact. Let's not say Shadow Warrior 2 is boring. It's not. It's a very fun game. I have a lot of hours in it. They really say so. But Shadow Warrior 3, I do like it that much more to where I could consider it better. So if you mix the two elements together, if you mix the games of Shadow Warrior 2 and 3, take more elements from 2's story as well as 2's all of the other mechanics, but then take more elements from 3's gameplay, you would have a very fun Shadow Warrior game. And maybe Flying Wild Hog will do something like that for Shadow Warrior 4, which, seeing how this game ended, in terms of the endings of the story, I definitely think there will be a 4th game. Honestly, I didn't know. I thought originally, before I saw the trailer of Shadow Warrior 3, I thought 2 was going to be the last game. I thought that was the end of the series, but it's not. But yeah, I still do recommend this game. If you had a lot of attachment to Shadow Warrior 2, and you want to try out this game, do not expect an experience similar to that, because it is not. It is a Shadow Warrior game in name alone. But then again, what is a Shadow Warrior game? I mean, there's not really a definitive outline. Technically, a Shadow Warrior game would be one most similar to the 1997 one. So yeah, I don't blame them for making a different game. If anything, this is more like an experiment, and maybe that's why they didn't want to make the game too long. It's just because they didn't really know how well they want to invest into this game, considering the gameplay was going to be so different, or considering the whole game itself is going to be so different. They probably didn't know how much they wanted to invest. So maybe if there's a Shadow Warrior 4, they will spruce it up and invest a lot more into it, making it an overall better game. And because again, yeah, Shadow Warrior 3 kind of just feels more experimental than definitive. Because again, there's just so little of it. Because again, they probably just didn't know how much they want to invest in it until they see how people feel about this game. How do new fans feel about it? How do returning fans feel? I think a mix of the last 2 Shadow Warriors and a mix of this one would make a much more compelling game, as opposed to just going 100% one direction, 100% the other. Because that's what it is. It's 100% in it, not 100%, but about like 80% in a different direction, 90%. It's not a bad game, but I think a more compelling game for Shadow Warrior fans, again, those coming from 1 and 2, a more compelling game for them would be a game that probably mixes both elements, as opposed to just stirring one way and not going another. But yeah, bottom line is, Shadow Warrior 3 on its own, it stands tall as a really fun and enjoyable game. But compared to Shadow Warrior 2, that's where some problems start coming in. And if you want to play this expecting more Shadow Warrior 2, you're not going to get that. You're going to get something again completely different. But still, on its own, I think it is still worth checking out. Even if you are a Shadow Warrior 2 fan, I still think it is worth checking out. Just don't expect the most. Go into it expecting a experience that is not similar to Shadow Warrior 2 at all. Spoiler: this section talks about some characters in Shadow Warrior 2. And how they're not in Shadow Warrior 3. I'm not going to specify this now, but I'm about to specify it, which may or may not spoil the game for you, partly. Where are the characters? There's a lot of characters that were in Shadow Warrior 2 that played a pretty big role in its story. They're just completely missing now. And I don't mean antagonists. There are a lot of good characters, like Zing's not in the game, and Mezu's gone. Kamiko I thought turned into the dragon, but the way they addressed the dragon in this game, it's not her. Gozu, we don't know what happened to him. Mamushi Heika, she died, as well as what was the lady the crying lady that made it so whenever the rain essentially means her crying. I know she died, but there's still a lot of characters that were just left out that I guess were presumed dead, and that's just it. They're just presumed dead, and nothing else. What happened to all of them? They were just wiped out from the story. Not a single word to trace about them.